Story 1. Lying in bed, crying and wishing I would die of natural causes so I wouldn't have to live another day as a friendless loser. I didn't start feeling better until I sought professional help and, after some experimentation, found a combination of medications that worked for me. Story 2. Postpartum depression made me reluctant to feed my child. I confided in my father, who took me straight to the emergency room. I was prescribed Paxil and monitored by a psychiatrist, which saved my life. My illness was severe 2 months after birth. By 8 months, I had transformed into a new person, filled with love for my child. It's still emotional to discuss, but it is essential to talk about connection and ask for help. Medication can also be beneficial. Story 3. I won't share my lowest moment here, but I will say that depression is often the result of a combination of factors. You have to deal with the really bad internal factors first: self-loathing, paranoia, self-doubt, and self-harm. This helps you return to a rational state. Next, you have to address the external factors such as toxic people, lifestyle choices, sleep, and diet. After that, focus on the less imminent internal factors such as finding happiness, avoiding behavioral cycles, learning how and why you became depressed, and investing in yourself emotionally. All of these aspects present unique challenges based on individual circumstances. However, they are all manageable. First, prioritize staying alive, then get grounded in reality, distance yourself from negative influences, and start climbing the hierarchy of needs. Story 4. Without sharing low points, there are some things that helped. Lexapro, eating healthy, spending time with friends, regular exercise, decent sleep, and ensuring that there is at least one activity to look forward to on the schedule each week. Story 5. I was at the lowest point in my life. Here's what I did. 1. I started taking medication consistently. I enrolled in college as an adult to learn a skill to ensure I would never be out of work again, specifically accounting. I cut out negative people from my life, including some family members. I recognized that healing is a process, not a one-time event, and I allowed myself some time for self-care. Story 6. I can think of 2 of my lowest moments. One was when I was cutting my wrists and bleeding heavily. It was raining outside and I was outside too. The rain was hitting my open wound, and that hurt immensely, so I couldn't complete what I started. I am not condoning or advocating for suicide. I am simply sharing my experience. At that moment, when I thought I was going to die, never in my life have I felt such peace before or since. I felt waves of tranquility flowing through my body, but it didn't last, and I was left miserable. I started watching videos of people taking their own lives on the internet. I don't know why, but I guess it brought me a disturbing sense of peace. The other moment was when I attempted to hang myself. I lost consciousness, and the hook broke, leaving me very devastated. It took a long time to get better, but years later, after therapy and medication, I made the decision to live or truly end it once and for all. I am here, not even 30 years old, and I feel so happy to be alive. My goal is to become one of the greatest actors of all time and use my acting to help people who are struggling with depression. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone. I have gone through a lot in my life, but depression has been the most challenging. Story 7. I have struggled with depression for 15 years, and I don't think it ever goes away. I have learned to manage it much better and practice healthy coping mechanisms, which usually keep me steady and out of its clutches. Of course, there are bad days, but from my past and other stories, I am aware it has been and could be significantly worse. I have had many moments when I believed I was at my lowest, but when I realized how bad my teeth had gotten from my depression affecting my personal hygiene, it shocked me. At that point, I spent more time intoxicated than sober, rarely slept, neglected everything, and knew it was truly the lowest form of myself I could have achieved. It has helped me get it together a little bit and has thankfully been enough recently to change my brain chemistry, leading me to want and actively pursue a healthier and better life. Story 8. When I consistently thought about my existence and purpose in life, I sometimes did not want to wake up the next morning. Finally, starting therapy and taking antidepressants literally saved my life. If I hadn't pushed myself at that moment, I probably would not be here right now. Story 9. I reached a point where the thought of ending things brought me a sense of tranquility. This lasted for several weeks, during which I began to imagine myself in various scenarios. I had been depressed for 3 years at that time and had been in therapy for a longer duration, while taking medication for 1 or 2 years. When those thoughts consumed me, I confided in my boyfriend. He reached out to the appropriate people who helped get me admitted for treatment. I spent 3 to 4 weeks in a psychiatric ward, during which the doctors advised me to discontinue my birth control pills. Once that medication was out of my system, I could finally breathe. Therapy began to help, and my medication started to work. That was many years ago, and although I have faced some difficult times since then, I have never felt as bad as I did during those years. Story 10. I spoke to a doctor who put me on medication, and I'm doing pretty well now. I went from thinking about taking my own life multiple times a day to hardly ever thinking about it. Story 11. I didn't want to get out of bed for months after an antidepressant mixed with alcohol consumption led to major depression. Story 12. I tend to overanalyze, but this can sometimes be useful. I reason with myself to determine if there is a valid reason for my depression. If there is, I can address it. If not, I need to let it pass. This approach may not work for everyone, and these feelings are often irrational. For me, it has become similar to realizing you're dreaming during a nightmare, which signifies that everything will be okay. Story 13. My lowest point was when I couldn't remember the last day I didn't cry. It had been months, and I had cried at least once every day. I began to improve once I started taking Lexapro. It provided my brain with the support it needed, allowing me to engage in activities that also helped me feel better, such as exercise and social interactions. Story 14. I don't know if it was a low point, but I was very sick. I had experienced depression for years, decades. I faced worsening skin and bowel issues. I was overweight and moody. I often fantasized about a button placed in front of me that could end my suffering without causing pain to my loved ones. Honestly, I would have pushed that button without hesitation. After pursuing my health issues for years, a naturopathic doctor conducted some blood tests, and one showed an elevated immune response to gluten. She suggested that I try a gluten-free diet for 6 weeks, and it helped. I committed to it. My digestive issues started to regulate. My skin began to clear up slowly, and all the unusual aches and pains began to disappear. I even lost 50 pounds, partly because I started walking more. Then my wife said something after a couple of months. "You're happy." And you know what? She was right, all because of changing my diet. Story 15. I accepted that I suffered from depression for reasons related to my brain chemistry. I started living a healthier life by eliminating alcohol, eating well, and exercising. I sought medical help, found purpose, and focused on setting and achieving smaller, reasonable goals that contribute to a larger objective. Story 16. I experienced a significant breakdown in 2022. I struggled with depression and depressive episodes for much of my life, but this was different. I was in a state of catatonic depression. I barely ate, did not move or speak, and only went to the bathroom, stared into space, and slept for 6 months. I exhausted all 12 weeks of the Family and Medical Leave Act and my state's medical leave. I was about to return to work, but somehow my return letter never reached my employer, and they told me I had resigned. This setback plunged me back into depression, as it was a job I thought I would retire from, and it even offered a pension. The depression was mishandled by the psychiatric nurse I was seeing, and unfortunately, if I had the doctor I have now, I probably would have kept my job and not experienced such prolonged depression. I've had trouble maintaining employment ever since. Once you lose one job, it's like a black mark on your resume, leading to losing others. Depression is incredibly challenging. I improved by finding the right doctor, receiving the correct diagnosis, bipolar depression, not major depression, and taking the appropriate medications. No amount of exercise or healthy eating could alter the chemistry of my brain, and I have tried everything before this. Story 17. My lowest point was when I was fixing some things on the roof of my house, and I found myself very tired and starting to feel dizzy. I decided to stop working and lay down on the sofa to rest. Then, I noticed that my cheeks were wet. I realized I was crying and had no idea why. I was crying in silence, tears pouring from my eyes, And when I understood this, I began to cry even more, sobbing without knowing the reason. As soon as I was able to stop, I called a psychotherapist. She didn't answer, so I left a message. She returned my call a few hours later, and we began our sessions almost immediately. I forced myself to listen and to do the exercises she recommended. To this day, I don't know if I am truly cured. These episodes don't happen anymore, but I need to be very aware of anything that feels off. Otherwise, I find myself descending into the same abyss. Story 18. There were moments that seemed worse on paper, but the worst feeling was the constant daydreaming of a quick death. It may sound like a joke, but using MDMA with a friend from high school, having so much fun, and sharing our insecurities helped me climb out of the pit I had been in for 2 years. Connecting with someone on an authentic level and expressing my fears took away their power. Story 19. I told my therapist that I am usually happy during the day but often cry myself to sleep. Apparently, that is not normal. Story 20. I overcame depression without medication, as I didn't want to risk medication pushing me towards self-harm, like it did with my mother. My lowest moment came when I found myself in a situation where I had strained my relationship with someone who was, at that time, my best friend. My friendships are extremely important to me, and without a strong family support system, they are my main source of support. The most important points I want to share are: 1. Understand that when we are unhappy, many of our thoughts and interactions with the world are unhelpful, and we can choose to let go of those ideas. And 2. Do not view depression as a singular monstrous entity, but rather as a collection of smaller issues that can be addressed individually. You cannot build a house by simply trying to build the structure. You need to start with laying the foundation and placing each brick carefully. Story 21. In my experience, you have to decide to move forward. I find that getting involved in a sports club helps. Exercise, focus, like-minded people, and a break from the routine. Ultimately, you need to make a conscious decision to stop going around in circles and dwelling on things, and to start living again. Take small steps, set realistic goals, and take pride in achieving them. I am not pretending it is easy, but this approach has worked for me. Story 22. 1. Stopped seeing my psychiatrist and taking multiple medications. Stopped drinking alcohol. Started doing something I used to enjoy, playing World of Warcraft. I met some fun people online who gave me back a social life. Started going outside and appreciating the beauty of nature. Offered to meet up with people online to have an actual social life. Enrolled in a study program. Met my husband. I realized that the light wasn't at the end of the tunnel. It was inside of me, and I could turn it back on whenever I liked. It was very much a change your situation to fix the problem kind of thing. Story 23. I realized that other people contributed to my depression, so I became very careful about who I let into my life. Story 24. I almost took my own life. The only thing that saved me was the realization that there are always people who suffer more than I do, so I have to be stronger. Story 25. Divorce can be challenging, especially when finances are tight, there is unemployment, and one struggles with alcohol. I found myself in a difficult situation, with children in school and needing to apply for assistance. At the application meeting, about 5 of us sat at a round table while a social worker explained the process. I was sitting next to her. Afterward, I asked the social worker a question, and she responded, "Who are you?" I didn't understand why that struck me so deeply. After that moment, I decided to join Alcoholics Anonymous. It was free and available anytime, anywhere. I discovered that I am not an alcoholic, but the support I received from those people truly saved my life. The talk therapy focused on gratitude and fellowship. I also made some great friends along the way. Story 26. I was suicidal to the point where I had to go to the hospital. I have had years of therapy, different medication combinations, and I have left relationships that did not serve me. I have taken time to spend with myself. I am on a medication combination that stabilizes me, so I have a lot more control over my life. While depressive episodes come and go, I have the ability to manage them. I also have much more to live for than I would have ever known had I not made it here. I will always try to give myself the life and respect I deserve. Story 27. I'm in the process of overcoming depression and anxiety, which has actually turned into bipolar disorder type 2. I have struggled with this for over 2 decades. I had an addiction problem with gaming from an early age, which continued until now. I reached rock bottom in terms of mental health over the past year and experienced true anhedonia. I told myself I was sick of feeling this way, so I embarked on a self-improvement plan and eliminated my bad habits, particularly video games. I also started exercising 3 times a week. I began taking medication for my hypomania, which I developed during the shock of exercise. It's been 2 months, and I can tell I'm getting better. I feel much more confident, have better self-esteem, experience minimal anxiety and depression, and I'm starting to feel pleasure again. It truly feels like a miracle and a life changer. I can't believe how the brain can change like this. If you find yourself in a bad place, consider doing what I did and take a hard reset. It works. Just give it a try. I have hardly ever commented in the past, so this is also a good sign of my recovery. Thanks for reading, and I hope you have a good night. Stay optimistic. Story 28. I won't go into my lowest point, but I'll share how I improved. I started microdosing mushrooms via a chocolate bar when I went to Medellin, Colombia. I continued microdosing and even took a larger dose. I went from constantly thinking about ending my life to being scared of dying. I used to take antidepressants and they helped, but not enough. I have been unemployed for a year, and it's not great, but this change happened after I started microdosing mushrooms. Had I not done them, I would be in severe depression right now or possibly dead by suicide. Story 29. Define better? I'm still feeling depressed, but honestly, it doesn't affect me as severely as it did 10 years ago. I overcame it out of spite and guilt. I refuse to break no matter what. I will not hurt others for my own benefit. And now I have a child and partner who provide me with the energy and strength to keep getting up, no matter how difficult life seems. The lowest moment for me was twofold. One night, I realized that if I died, the only people at my funeral would be a few family members and colleagues who wanted a day off. The other moment was when I planned my death and wrote my note, until I understood that no matter where I did it, some innocent person would find me, which would traumatize them. I also realized my mother would never recover from losing me that way. Another strategy one found helpful in fighting depression was reading books and making plans. I despise leaving things unfinished, so I would push myself to complete a book, film series, TV show, or game, or to keep a promise to attend an event or go for coffee with a friend. Story 30. I was bedbound, struggling to read or even communicate, and overall just felt like a shell of my former self. I woke up every morning praying I would have a heart attack or something because I didn't have the physical means to end my life and was afraid of how much worse my condition would get if I failed. Then one day I realized that even if I can't do much, it's more than I could do if I were dead. Maybe I can only write for 10 to 15 minutes a day, but that's 10 to 15 minutes more than I could do if I were rotting in my grave. I realized that I couldn't go without finishing the novel I started working on before I fell ill, and that if I die, it will all disappear with me. I am currently getting better day by day. I am already able to walk around the house for a few minutes, and I have been sketching for about 10 to 20 minutes a day. I am grateful that I didn't go through with it, and I genuinely think that it will all work out. Maybe I won't be the person I was before my illness going forward, but all I want is to be able to draw and write again, and I am slowly getting it back. Story 31. After a difficult breakup, I turned to drinking and partying to distract myself from the pain. A few weeks later, I hooked up with a friend and engaged in a friends with benefits arrangement for a while. During this time, I learned to love and accept myself, realizing that if someone could like me for who I am, why couldn't I like myself? I experienced another wave of depression due to unresolved issues weighing on my mind. Working as a security guard at a remote location gave me over 40 hours a week to confront my past. I meditated through it, processing each experience, questioning why it still affected me, and ultimately, I was able to let go. Additionally, I found myself stuck in a cycle of mindless content and trivial podcasts focused on stereotypes and societal decline. I recognized that these issues were not mine, and I questioned why I allowed them to influence my mood. I decided to unplug from all of it. Finding meaning, interests, and happiness is the way forward. Story 32. I barely got out of bed. Every day, I slept and woke up in complete darkness, and I hated the light. I stopped talking to all my friends. My job was causing it, so I quit that job and I got better. It was that simple. Story 33. I have experienced depressive and hypomanic episodes since I was a child, as I have bipolar disorder. I fell into a long and deeply distressing depressive episode when I was 14 or 15, which led to a suicide attempt. I ended up in a ward for a couple of weeks. I do not remember the treatment I received, but it was very effective. Receiving the correct diagnosis actually helped me a lot. Over time, I improved by consistently taking my medication and discussing my feelings with my family. I stopped the medication a couple of times during hypomanic episodes, but this always resulted in suicidal thoughts. A few years ago, I decided to be responsible about my treatment and take my medication consistently, as my family would be heartbroken if I were to die. I am very fortunate to have a supportive family. Since then, I have generally been stable. Story 34. The lowest moment was feeling like I would never get better and accepting defeat before realizing that depression is a continuous battle worth fighting. Leaving the house to do anything can make a significant difference. Story 35. I started living healthier by sleeping and waking up earlier and drinking plenty of water, which helps my brain. Story 36. My lowest moment was when I was on medication and realized I couldn't feel anything at all. Instead of feeling sad, happy, or angry, I felt like a zombie, and I hated it. I started weaning off of Zoloft right then and never looked back. It was postpartum depression. Story 37. I had it for half a year, likely triggered by postpartum depression combined with my spouse having a mental crisis, which left me with no emotional support while dealing with the new baby. I got over it by not doing anything reckless. I was miserable and didn't care about much, even things I used to care about. But I kept going anyway because the only other option was despair. Depression didn't suddenly make me more comfortable with violence or lose my sense of logic. I believed that I would eventually pull out of it and not be depressed forever, even if every direction currently felt hopeless. So, I begrudgingly trudged along until my mind stopped weighing me down. Story 38. I have had 4 prior episodes starting at 15 years old, where I became suicidal, couldn't eat or sleep, and in each prior instance, some combination of medications helped me recover. However, this current episode 1 I'm coming out of lasted almost a year after my second son was born, and no medications were working. I tried ketamine, but it didn't work. I also underwent a few sessions of transcranial magnetic stimulation, which didn't help either. Finally, I admitted myself for inpatient treatment and expressed that I felt like I was in prison on Earth, despite everything in my life appearing beautiful on paper. I requested electroconvulsive therapy, and it absolutely saved my life. I am beginning to feel like myself again. Story 39. I overcame bipolar disorder by utilizing social support, working with a good psychiatrist, and engaging with 2 psychologists who had different approaches. I focused on maintaining healthy sleep habits and understanding my triggers and bodily warning signs. Story 40. I am unsure if it was a moment or more like a series of moments, an era of chaos because I simply did not care. I was required to go to therapy, which was the best decision in hindsight. Through therapy and medication, I was able to sort my life out. Story 41. Lowest moment. I was in a relationship where I was very unhappy, but I convinced myself to stay after just moving in with him. I was crying all the time and having suicidal thoughts. I saw a psychiatrist who immediately prescribed bupropion. After a month of taking it, I broke up with my boyfriend. I traveled solo abroad, started dating, and enjoyed a fulfilling social life. I bought a condominium and got a new job that greatly improved both my work life and salary. I met my current boyfriend and moved to a new city with him, and I love it very much. Story 42. I don't think you really beat depression. It is more like depression is a natural result of living in the world as we do. Psychedelics can help, but they can also push you into mania, which can upset employers. Antidepressants like Prozac and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors can help, but not when things become overwhelming. Story 43. My lowest moment was the period between when my dad was diagnosed with cancer and about a year after his death. I lost practically all executive function for nearly 2 years. I didn't do anything except work, and even then, I was incredibly lucky not to lose my job because my attendance was so bad. I just rotted away. This period is when I first started experiencing full-blown manic episodes, and the depressive episodes that followed were like nothing I had ever experienced. Mixing that with the profound grief I was feeling, I'm just so glad that I didn't end it. When I was around 23, my depression began to worsen significantly. I spent about 4 years socially isolating myself and hiding in my room when I wasn't working. I felt like I could barely interact with the people around me. I feel like I lost years of my life. I have bipolar disorder, so I'll never truly be able to beat it, but I've learned how to mitigate the damage. Appropriate medication is important. I could have never done this unmedicated. This might sound like a cliché, but hear me out. I had to find the fight in me. I know that sounds cliché, but I have to fight or I'll lose control. Momentum is the most important thing, especially when I feel a depressive episode coming on or am actively in one. I have to force myself to get out of bed, go to work, take care of myself, and manage my household. It's incredibly hard, but I know if I stop, I will fall back into a deep depression. I need to get up and do things. Otherwise, I'll just rot away on my phone. I've reached a point where I manage to keep myself busy from the time I get off work until around the time I'm ready to lie down for the night, and it feels so great. Not a paid advertisement or anything, but I use an app called Finch. You set tasks you want to complete, and your bird grows as you accomplish your tasks. This might sound silly, but at this point, I can motivate myself to do things just to progress my bird. For what it's worth, it took a long time to learn how to do this. My depressive symptoms started when I was 12 years old, and I just started to fight like this about 6 months ago. I'll be 27 next month. Give yourself grace. Story 44. There wasn't really a single low point. It felt like a few months filled with them. However, there was a bright spot. I met a girl who I quickly fell for. Then she absolutely crushed me, flipping something in my mind and causing me to change everything about myself. I occasionally slip back into that mindset, but I now have many more mental tools to help me. Story 45. I had a sudden realization that I was going to die if I didn't do something. By going to die, I mean I was going to harm myself very soon. I was looking at trees and imagining which one could be solid enough to hold my weight if I were to hang myself. I considered buying a rope and thought about doing it at night so no one would see me. I also had vivid dreams about harming myself. I dreamt that I was drowning, and instead of fighting back, I would let myself sink. I dreamt that I would fall onto train tracks while a train was passing. I was fantasizing a lot about harming myself. I had a plan to do it so I could finally be at peace. In the meantime, I stopped sleeping and began to stop eating. It's a strange feeling to realize that you are going to die soon. By some miracle, I still had enough clarity and strength to realize I need to get help. I think it's because I had already experienced a depressive episode a few years before, though not as severe. I believe that if I could overcome it once, I could do it again. It took me a psychiatrist, antidepressants, psychotherapy, journaling, swimming, running, and sleeping pills, but it worked. It took about 6 months to feel significantly better. I even went through a very stressful life event in the following months, and I held strong and didn't relapse. Now, 2 years later, I feel good. I am still on antidepressants, but at a low dose because I don't see the point in stopping them, to be honest. I feel great on them. They eliminated my suicidal thoughts and drastically reduced my anxiety. Story 46. Medication, rehabilitation 3 times a week, and therapy were important, but none of that would have worked without the intense hard work of convincing myself that the world isn't all bad and that the parts that are just need work. Once I decided to focus my time on the work instead of complaining, everything clicked. 611 days ago, I climbed down to the river behind where I was living and sat waiting to jump in. I had been drowning for years already, and I figured I might as well spend a little time doing it for real. I couldn't do it, and I eventually hiked back to my apartment and climbed into bed next to my fiancée. She asked me where I had been, and I just said, I went on a hike. I have spiders all over me. She looked at me and then went back to sleep. The next morning, I got a call that a bed had opened at a rehabilitation center, and I just needed to make it to Monday. 601 days ago, I took my last drink. Even that didn't cure or overcome my depression. In fact, it still isn't beaten except into submission for now. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I was a fool to take everything I have for granted and worry about what I don't have. Now I look at what I possess. I have a fiancé and a soon-to-be stepson who are still with me, and they love me. My cat surely loves me, so I can't be unlovable. How could so many people and cats be wrong? So I started to love myself, and that began with trusting myself. If nothing else, I bet I am less annoying to be around these days, and if not, I don't care. Story 47. I wouldn't say I've overcome it, but I definitely have it more under control than I used to. I don't really think I had a super low point. It just came and went in waves. As one of my therapists said, recovery isn't linear. I would say the lowest point was when I was engaging in self-harm and had an eating disorder. Surprisingly, what helped was getting properly diagnosed with the mental disorders I had and getting on the right medications. The most significant factor for me was moving out of my parents' house and living independently. Now I'm teaching myself healthy habits, such as proper eating. I lift weights to gain muscle, which I was previously against, and I can attend therapy without resistance. My job has also been a significant awakening. I'm a first responder, and I've had to inform many families that their loved one has passed away. Seeing their reactions made me think differently about how my family would react if I passed. I can get up every day, go to work, and complete my online schoolwork, which I had difficulty doing when I was in a very low place. Story 48. This might be a little triggering. I dealt with depression, mixed with anxiety and anger, for about 20 years. I tried therapy, medication, changed my diet, and moved across the country. Nothing ever helped. Last year, my boyfriend and I had a disagreement that sent me into a huge spiral for what felt like the 10th time. After he dropped me off at home, I walked inside, slammed my head into the wall, and decided I was done living like this. I had struggled with self-harm for a while, and no medication was helping. I was about to ruin another relationship. That night, I prayed to God, stating that I was done treating myself poorly and asked for help. The next day, I quit my medication and got a lot of self-help books. I haven't felt that depression since that night. It's just gone. I also got heavily into thrifting and estate sales. Story 49. I haven't overcome it, but what helped me, in addition to other suggestions, was to reframe my understanding of it. It's not a choice, and it's not laziness. You can have everything in the world and still be depressed. It's a medical condition. I wouldn't ask someone with a heart condition if they considered not having a poor heart. I also tried to do things for others, listen, volunteer, or donate. It's hard to explain, but it helps. Be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. Talk to yourself as you would to a friend and how you would want others to talk to you. Above all, do not treat your health and its implications as a moral failing. Story 50. I started on a healthier path by eating better and exercising. I had so much energy. I began waking up and making my bed. I looked forward to exercising. Everything came together. Story 51. I've had a lot of really low points. I know I can't beat it, but I try hard to remember that my thoughts will go away. I try to release that from myself. Otherwise, I'll just keep giving space in my head to my thoughts. I can live right now in the present where I am. It doesn't always work, but I try other things as well. I listen to music when I go to the gym. Cleaning makes me feel like I accomplished something. Sometimes movement makes me feel better, but there are times I can't get out of bed. Other times I just lay in bed to allow myself to rest, watch TV, play a game, or take a nap. There's nothing wrong with resting your body and mind. Sometimes it's the smells, lighting a candle, buying myself flowers, going outside to feel the grass, or looking at the flowers. Petting my dog helps too. I found that pastel colors lighten my mood. So I bought a few shirts in those colors to wear and put me in a brighter mood. I keep a to-do list so I feel more accomplished. Even if it's just one item off my list, I take joy in marking it off. I try to plan things in advance and stay on top of my tasks, so when I need a long rest in bed, I don't have to be upset that I'm doing nothing for a little while. I force myself to take a shower, brush my teeth, and maybe put on lotion. I remind myself that taking care of me is an act of self-love. Even when we think we are alone on this journey, there are so many people on this ride with us, likely in silence, just like me. Story 52. The way I got out of the funk was by making it not about myself but about someone I love more than myself. I said that my wife deserves an active, happy husband. However, I was not happy. So I told myself, what would I do or how would I act if I was happy? I just forced myself to act like it, like an actor playing a role. Those actions and feelings started to come back slowly, and I began to feel a little like myself again. Admitting and recognizing your depression is the first step. Believing you have the power to change it is the second step. Good luck and Godspeed. Story 53. I was lying in bed and realized I hadn't spoken to anyone in the month that had passed during my episode. Through the haze, it occurred to me that my mother and brother, whom I lived with at the time, would only notice I was gone once they caught a whiff of my rotting corpse. I was 14. It made me feel worse, heartbroken actually, but I think that's warranted for a little while, and I think at that point I was the closest to the metaphorical ledge I had ever been, until that crushing pressure of numbness, emptiness, sadness, and self-hatred morphed into rage and disgust, and later acceptance. I decided that I would live if only for myself, and I have been. I'm 23 next Friday. I don't speak to my family anymore, and I'm better for it. I wouldn't say I've healed or have depression overcome, but when I have an episode, it's a lot easier to deal with. I mean, if 14-year-old me could pull through after learning something as horrible as my family's complete disregard for my well-being, then I can certainly do it now. Story 54. We all have different levels and causes for depression. My mentor told me over 40 years ago that people like us should learn to cultivate gratitude because self-pity cannot coexist with gratitude. That was after I served a prison term. Even there, I was able to find the occasional silver lining. But maybe I just have mild depression. I know I have met people who need much more than a platitude to feel better. I do not ever diminish their experience. Story 55. It wasn't a magical flick of the switch, but life became much easier once I eliminated alcohol and started practicing martial arts. Story 56. You don't beat it because it never goes away, but by doing things to take your mind off it, by spending time with the people who make you happy, and by learning to navigate around it, it does get better over time. Story 57. I cannot go into details about my lowest point as it may be triggering for some, but it involves certain plans. The thing that gradually helped me was appreciating the little things I do, such as waking up in the morning or getting my own food. Additionally, setting short and simple goals significantly helped me. Story 58. I feel like it improves as life circumstances get better but never completely goes away. I was able to improve by asking myself if I would rather be broke and sad or have money and be sad, which motivated me to work harder. I also asked myself if I would rather be unhealthy and sad or fit and sad, which encouraged me to start working out regularly. Story 59. When I couldn't see a way out, I felt overwhelmed by misery. Nothing made me happy anymore. I especially hated the evenings, as seeing the light fade and darkness come was dreadful. I felt unable to find joy in anything. It seemed like I could never be happy or have anything to look forward to. It took a long time, but with some medications, which I discontinued as soon as I could, and online therapy tools, plus talking to my dad, who also battled depression for most of his life and understood what I was going through firsthand, I finally clawed my way back up. I think because I had a family, I imagined what it would do to them if I were no longer here, but the thought of ending it was terrifying too. The main thing is to seek help, not to just suffer but to reach out where you can, whether it's through helplines, a doctor, counseling, or anywhere, because there is definitely help available. I know I will always be prone to depression. I have had bouts since my teens, and now at 50, I can recognize the early signs and keep an eye on it. Things that help me day to day include staying busy. Sitting at home with just my thoughts can be dangerous, so I try to spend time doing things I enjoy, not worrying so much about others' opinions of me, letting things go, and not dwelling on people's mean remarks. They are their problem, not mine. I always wear bright colors, which help my mood, and I appreciate the positive comments from others. One significant change that helped me immensely was cutting toxic people out of my life. They can cause the most damage. I used to have a very toxic friendship, and it took me years to realize it. Once I cut ties, I felt instantly better. It is essential to keep only those who wish you well in your life, as those who don't can do serious harm to your well-being. Try to find joy in small things, spend time in nature, and exercise. Even just walking is beneficial. Don't spend too much time on the internet, especially social media, as it can be very harmful. I find music very therapeutic. I never leave home without my earphones, and when I'm home, I usually have music playing. It has helped me through tough times. Story 60. Sounds odd, but going to jail really helped me manage my emotions. I was there for about a year and a half fighting my case. You do not want to be that person feeling sorry for themselves. Strange, but I haven't cried once in the more than 2 years since my initial arrest. I'm out of jail and feel generally more stable. Whenever I start to feel down, I remember that I'm free and that I have gotten through much worse before. Story 61. I don't think I ever actually had depression, but here are stories of friends and family members that I dealt with. My cousin, who is also a friend, had Alzheimer's. He didn't even remember his own son, so my friend had to take care of him. He would walk out at night or in the mornings, and I would help as best as I could. He also had a girlfriend. One day, while driving at night, he shared so much with me, expressing that he felt he wasn't good enough for his girlfriend. He was sad about his father, his life, and he mentioned wanting to harm himself. I'm a man, so when I heard this, I was concerned and spoke in a stern voice. I told him that many people care about him. His girlfriend doesn't want him to end his life, his father needs him, and his family needs him. He has friends who care about him. We're both first generation, so I emphasized the sacrifices his parents made to have him here in this country. I told him that if he were to harm himself, he would leave all of them alone and make the situation worse. I questioned whether he was really going to do that to them. Then I told him to consider what was wrong. He looked at me, acknowledged that I was right, and we both laughed. We started going to the gym together and talked every week. 5 years passed, and now he has a child with his girlfriend and is happy, although he hasn't been consistent with the gym. Another story is about my sister. In 2nd grade, she was depressed because of a bully and went to a therapist. She almost got medication, but I never knew this because she didn't tell me, fearing I would make fun of her. She also felt depressed when her high school friends were no longer her friends. I shared my feelings on this, and people may not agree with me, but I disagree with medication for depression and sadness. Anything that alters your brain or the chemicals in it is a no for me, unless it's absolutely necessary, like for seizures or something similar. I told her that people don't care about her. If her friends didn't care, then why should she care so much about them? At the end of the day, everyone is in it for themselves. Whether you agree with that or not, that's the truth. Now my sister and I are closer than ever. We talk daily. She shares her news with me, and sometimes we work out together. She even acts as my coach during push-ups, encouraging me not to stop. Story 62. There have been many moments of loneliness and depression. Life has its color in almost all aspects and unfolds naturally. I remain strong. One of my cousins said, "When that time is no longer here, this will not be here either." In the end, patience was rewarded. Story 63. I experienced depression due to burnout from work. The turning point was when I nearly fainted at work due to my body reacting to stress with extremely high blood pressure. My supervisor sent me home, and I was unwell for about 6 months. During that time, I attended intensive group therapy for 6 to 8 weeks and met some amazing people who became very close friends. I changed my role and now work with children under the age of 3 instead of those aged 3 to 6. I regularly apply what I learned in therapy, such as how to stand up for myself and set boundaries regarding what I can and cannot do. All of this was possible because I have wonderful friends who support me. and a great supervisor who truly values me and did everything possible to help me recover and find a way to work again. Additionally, the healthcare system in Germany allowed me to access the therapy and self-care I needed. However, I believe my case was a more manageable form of depression, which does not compare to the struggles others face with more severe cases. Story 64. Eating a burger at In-N-Out, I found myself wondering about the purpose of living and why I didn't just end my life. I had recently graduated from college and landed a high-paying job, but it wasn't as fulfilling as I had assumed it would be. Additionally, I struggle with clinical depression and anxiety, so I often find myself feeling overwhelmed for no apparent reason. I took a couple of important steps to address my situation. First, I made a decision. I wasn't going to die. Part of my suicidal thoughts stemmed from the belief that if I was going to die anyway, it might as well be sooner rather than later. By choosing to live, I was able to counter that line of thinking. Second, I established a new purpose in life. I had previously been misled into thinking that success in my career was the ultimate goal, but I realized that this was ultimately unfulfilling. My new purpose is to enjoy life and help others do the same. Winning or losing doesn't matter to me. What matters is having fun. These changes have helped me tremendously. I'm excited about tomorrow and the new experiences it will bring. Story 65. I was in a psychiatric ward after a suicide attempt. My mother brought me a chocolate surprise egg. I thought I could harm myself by swallowing the toy inside, hoping to choke. When it got stuck in my throat, I felt regret and panic. I was scared I was going to die instead of feeling relieved. Story 66. I suffered from this for about a decade as a result of traumatic experiences I had in my 20s. I won't go into detail about my lowest moment. The entirety of the experience would best be described as a long-term abyss. Several notable mentions include being told I smelled bad, inhaling carbon monoxide, flunking out of graduate school despite being a former magna cum laude student and not caring at all, having my life turned upside down from Europe to Asia, being in an abusive relationship, living homeless and scavenging for food during the pandemic. One day, I started doing some somatic exercises and committed to them every day. 18 months later, I'm not finished, but I feel more normal than I ever have in my life. I didn't want temporary solutions. I wanted permanent healing, and I'm achieving that. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.